Welcome to Scotland Speaks on a rainy day in Glasgow on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. But it's not business as usual for Scotland Speaks. How can it be? Because Alex Salmond is no longer with us. And like in so many things for so many of us who worked with Alex for such a long period of time, we've been left to make a lot of decisions about the future. And of course we don't have Alex to ask, and a common thread from everyone who I've spoken to has been we always knew that we could ask Alex and he would know the right thing to do. In relation to this show, Scotland Speaks, I know he wanted it to continue. It was always Alex's plan for the show to carry us right through to the Scottish parliamentary elections in 2026, which was, of course, to see his election and return to the Scottish Parliament, so needful of his return to that entity, to take Scotland to a better place and to lead us to independence. Unfortunately, that's not to be in terms of Alex, but Alex would want us to continue with his legacy in politics and indeed in show business. And so we shall use our very best endeavours to bring forward every Saturday a good show, a show about Scotland and a show about the people of Scotland. Now, Alex used to watch the show every single week without fail, unless of course he was distracted by NEC meetings or public meetings or the call of duty. And so on the 12th of October, North Macedonia Day, we can never forget, we did both sit down and watch live at Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond and that last show. And he was so happy, looking forward to the future and the future shows as we planned out what we would do in the weeks and months to come. It's my job and the job of all of us who believe in Scottish independence to honour his legacy and finish his unfinished business. And this show has an important part to play. So we return to your screens every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. We will, of course, honour Alex's legacy. Scotland Speaks is not in the business of erasing the past, as some others have tried to do in Alex's respect, but honour the past, honour his contribution to Scottish society, Scottish life, to our personal lives, and to, of course, the cause of Scottish independence, and ensure that we complete the final chapter of his yet unfinished book in delivering Scottish independence. Now, to do that, I need your help. I'm hoping over the weeks to come, as we honour his legacy and look towards the future, you write into the show at the usual address, theshow@alexsalmond.scot, with your stories about Alex. And if you want, write to me about coming into the studio. Let us hear from you. It was always our plan to turn the show from the celebrities of the movement to the people of the movement. As Alex predicted, none of you were prepared to go back into the shadows in 2014. So it was at his memorial on the 30th of November when the streets of Edinburgh were lined, and so it shall remain. I want very much this to be a show that involves all of you. And so we turn to the business of this week's show. Now, of course, it didn't seem appropriate for me to start the show on set because I wanted to explain to you why we were continuing with the show and why we absolutely felt the need to do so. But we will go into the studio, and I would ask you to bear with us for the next couple of weeks because we will need some time over the Christmas and New Year period to dismantle the set and start afresh with a new set that can involve hopefully more people in the show. The same for obviously the naming of the show and the Twitter handle of the show. So I just had to balance as finely as I possibly could with the sensitivity that I know that you entrust me with, the transition from this being a show with Alex to having to continue without him, but with him firmly in our hearts. So after the break, we're going to return to that studio just for a couple of weeks. And in today's show, we'll be hearing from the former Westminster leader of the ALBA Party, Neale Hanvey, who's now working hard to deliver Alex's dream, along with the General Secretary of the ALBA Party, Chris McEleny. This has been a very eventful week for the ALBA Party, with two important defections, one from Mike Daly and one from Angus Brendan McNeil. So we can look forward to hearing from Mike Daly, who will be in the show next week. He's going to update us on the Fannings case, which is of course the case against the UK and Scottish governments in terms of the winter fuel payment. And then we will hear from Angus Brendan McNeil as to why he joined ALBA. So before we head inside, I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of the whole team here at Scotland Speaks. We are a small team, but we're a committed team, and we spend a lot of time working with Alex and learning so much from him, and hopefully in time when we're ready and when you're ready, we can reflect back on some of those funny moments, of which there are so many that you haven't yet seen, but we've held very much on camera for editing in due course. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time to listen to me, even if it's just for these opening remarks. And I hope you will consider joining us in the future every Saturday at 10 o'clock. And we'll have to come up with some new phrases to replace those of old. Maybe you can write in with those as well. But I look forward to hearing from you as you write in to us. And hopefully you can come into the studio and share your memories of Alex, and also share your ideas on how we get the people of Scotland activated to deliver Scottish independence. Because at the end of the day, that's all Alex Salmond lived for. And it's what he left us the job to complete. See you after the break.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks, in from the cold and windy rain of Glasgow to the studio. As I'd said before the break, I've asked for a bit of your time to redo the set and rejig everything over the Christmas period, but for now we are in the studio obviously where Alex did his final show with us at broadcast on the 12th of October, and he is of course in our hearts and minds at all time, and it's just right and proper that we continue to honour his memory and deliver upon his legacy. And I'm joined by two people just now who are intent on doing just that. Neale Hanvey and Chris McEleny, welcome to Scotland Speaks, which will of course be the new name of the show in due course. But now is an opportunity, first of all, before we get on to politics, which is what Alex would like us to get on to as soon as possible, is some reflections on Alex. Neale, of course, you've been in the studio and interviewed by Alex on a number of occasions. So some thoughts from you.
Well, I think the place to start is the phone call from Kenny on the 12th of October when he gave me the devastating news, and my reaction to that was obviously deep sadness, but also a great deal of anger. Not misplaced anger, but just the frustration that he wasn't going to be here for the delivery of the dream that he spent his life fighting for. But also there's real clarity in my mind that it now falls to us to honour his legacy by delivering that dream. And you know, there's no more inspirational a character in Scotland's story than Alec, and whether he's with us or not, he will forever be the champion of Scottish independence. He will always effectively be the leader of the independence campaign, certainly in my mind, and certainly in the hearts and minds of many, many people. And I think we saw that very clearly demonstrated outside St Giles at the recent memorial. So his legacy is enduring, and like all great leaders, he will live on in the hearts and minds of everyone for years and years to come.
Of course, on the 12th of October, I'd mentioned in opening remarks, Neale, that Alex had actually watched the show in the morning. He was always keen to watch his work and look at what he'd done and how we can improve things and do things better. And I know over the period of time when you were in Parliament, you would often have many discussions with him, and he offered such great guidance to us all in terms of what we should be doing, or perhaps questions we could be asking or issues we could be raising. And I think for us, for all of us, we always knew that there was someone to ask, and he would always know the right thing to do. Do you feel that sense?
Yeah, I mean, it was always a real pleasure when the phone went and it was Alec on the other end, and it would always be about something important, and it would be to both gather my thoughts on, you know, how we should progress on a specific point, or to share his take. He was such a nurturing leader, and you know, a tremendous friend, and even right up to the last meeting that we had as a national executive the week that he passed away. His energy and determination for independence was as strong as it's ever been, and you know, those are the types of things that will always stay with me. I think that's one of the really difficult things to deal with, is that I know I'm not going to get one of those phone calls again. I'm not going to have that illuminating conversation with a great man again. But the upside of that is that he shared so much of himself with all of us that we have a pretty good idea about the kind of tactics and the ambition that we should all have going forward. So, yeah.
Chris, of course, Alex is speaking on an international platform in North Macedonia, and it's worth saying that the government were exceptional in the President's office in the management of Alex's repatriation, and the proper send-off that they gave him that was well deserved and merited, and they did it properly, and we're very, very grateful for that, as primarily, of course, the family are. But on that international stage, Chris, he was speaking, enjoying himself, getting the respect he had deserved and earned over so many years in office from international leaders. Now, you've spent quite a lot of time travelling with Alex at a number of international engagements as well. What was your impression of how he was considered on that world stage?
You know, it's so interesting because for many years, you know, starting from being a child and hearing your mum say to your dad, "There's Alex Salmond on the TV," and you would come in, because back in those days, you know, it would be, you know, wouldn't be as often. He would make substantial interventions. So from, like, you know, really admiring and respecting Alec from that age to then actually being, you know, inside the room, understanding, it was, you know, that first of all was a real privilege. And then when we started going places, so, you know, it was quite amazing, you know, went to EFTA, spoke to the Secretary General of EFTA, sitting in the room with Alec, or, you know, go to Catalonia, you know, watch, you know, the world press wanting to hear his opinion. You know, it really did, you know, drive it home to me that the world looked at Alex Salmond as the voice of Scotland. You know, regardless if he'd been out of office for several years or not, he was the face of the Scottish independence movement. It was Alex Salmond that the Catalonians would look to for advice and leadership, particularly because they had quite a difficult period, and they saw Alec as someone that actually delivered, you know, a referendum beyond legal challenge, which was very much their dream. So when you were in Catalonia, it was it was almost like, you know, being in a rock band, you know, seeing how people would stop Alec in the street, and you would actually be surprised. He would always, you know, joke that he wasn't surprised, but I think he was surprised sometimes as well, that, you know, you'd be walking along the street, you know, a story told me one of the trips I wasn't on, when he was in California, and a bus stopped of, I think it was it Vietnamese tourists, because they recognised Alex Salmond, and they stopped and they wanted selfies with him. And I don't think people in Scotland actually appreciated or even realised that they had this, you know, internationally recognised, respected, and, you know, credible leader that actually in 2014 would have taken us onto the international stage, would have had the international community willing to talk to him about how we could develop as a country. And actually, 10 years on from the referendum, he was still the person to go to. And you talk about the international stage, but of course, even domestically, when you're in London with Alec, you know, just so, you know, Neale talked about anger, you know, forever frustrated me that, you know, in London, Alex Salmond was, you know, one of the highest and most respected politicians, and the ITN news, the ITV, the BBC national news want to hear Alec's opinion on the world of things. Quite often, ironically, when Alec said something in a London studio, it embarrassed the BBC up in Scotland that, well, if that's running on the BBC network news, we better, you know, cover it. But it was just, you know, it was really awesome when you seen the esteem that he was held in, which, of course, we've seen at the celebration event last Saturday. The sheer volume of people from, you know, probably, you know, you'll be hard worked to find a room again anytime ever, which is such a broad cross-section of Scottish society, from traditional people on the left, on the right, you know, civic society, you know, Knights of the Realm, Lords, you know, it was really, I think, summed up the respect that people had for Alex Salmond. And, you know, that was one of the, you know, the main lessons I learned, was that it takes a lot of hard work to get yourself into that position. And he, you know, he never underestimated the privilege and the responsibility he had. That's why he was such a great leader, and it's why he's such a really sad loss to our party, our movement, and Scotland.
On the California story, I should add that Alex is walking on down the Hollywood Walk of Fame because he had just interviewed Sharon Stone, and we were looking for her star. But again, apart from the tourists recognise him, and it was just quite an amazing, almost surreal. If Hollywood wasn't surreal enough, you've got Alex Salmond in the middle of it, and people saying, well, there's Alex Salmond from Scotland, Scottish Prime Minister, and being surrounded for photographs, which of course he loved, but also gave so much time to individual people. But the fact that he was at that time in Hollywood, having interviewed Sharon Stone in Beverly Hills, then coming back to a Scottish stage to talk about the winter fuel payment challenge, demonstrates the length and breadth and depth of the ability of Alex to straddle all spheres and be the master of all that he surveyed.
So just a quick point on that.
Yes.
It's really important. See, when you were abroad with Alec, people thought he was the former Prime Minister of Scotland. And we live in Scotland, so we know it's not an independent country. And it struck me that lots of people don't realise that. Lots of people thought Scotland was an independent country. And I think because Alec made his stand so tall on the international stage, there's Alex Salmond, the former Prime Minister of Scotland, as if we were already an independent country, because he'd built us up so high. And, you know, I think that's something that's really important, that he has, you know, re-established Scotland as a modern, proud and vibrant nation. And again, it's something that he probably never ever domestically got the credit for.
Indeed, and that obviously, I suppose, takes us on to, you know, what we do now. What does Scotland do now? What does the independence movement do now? What does ALBA do now? We are, over the next few weeks, of course, going to spend some time across every show remembering Alex, and there's lots of stories, and I've asked viewers to write in with their personal stories, because it's important that people hear that, because his involvement in people's lives at every level is really important. Everybody has a story to tell, and I've invited people to come into the studio and tell those stories. But I suppose as we honour that and remember that, we have to remember above all his drive to reach that end goal, and the fact that time wasn't on our side. 2026 was a key election, and therefore the need for ALBA to stay strong and power ahead. And we have had, of course, this week, two very high profile members joining the party, and Mike Daly, a solicitor advocate, and of course Angus Brennan-McNeil, a former MP for Neale and Year. Alex taught me to say that properly, told me I should always remember to say that properly, learn how to do it properly. All of these lessons come back to us all the time, the benefit of spending so much time with him. So Neale, I ask you first of all, obviously it's very important for the party to now see people coming towards Alex's message and the message of ALBA.
Well, I think the quality that Alec, I think you've hinted at it already, Taz, the quality that Alec had that set him apart from many other politicians was that he was genuinely interested in the people that he represented and genuinely interested in making the lives of the people of Scotland better. That's his mission. It wasn't independence for its sake. It was independence as a gateway to a better future for the people of Scotland. And so we must always ensure that we continue to frame our efforts in that way. I mean, the campaign that he was working with the Fannings and Mike Daly on challenging the winter fuel payment cut is just a perfect example of how passionate he was about these challenges and the challenges that people faced. And so we have to honour that ambition for the people of Scotland. We have to make sure and always ensure that our policies are about making the lives of the people of Scotland better, because only by pursuing those types of policies do you continue to build on the trust and confidence of the people of Scotland. And that's how you give people the courage to step forward towards independence. And so that's absolutely fundamental. I mean, Alec did it in spades as First Minister, but he never gave up on that grounding support for the people. And that was, that, you know, we've seen that reciprocated since he passed away, both up in Stricken and the very kind comments of people in the communities who represented up that way in Scotland, but also on the streets of Edinburgh at his memorial. People knew that Alex Salmond was absolutely 100% on their side. So we must always be on the side of the people of Scotland.
And Chris, of course, we've had an increase in our membership in the party, as well as the high-profile people who've joined us. And I think it was yourself that said in the press this week, more to come, more to follow. What's the message to the membership as to what we need to be doing now? Because Alex would be telling us to get on with the job. We have a limited time in our hands to 2026. So what are we saying to people in terms of what ALBA's plan is?
Yeah, so our worlds have been turned upside down and changed, beyond, perhaps we'll never, properly reconcile that. But the political reality, as Alec, I'm sure, would have reminded us, is exactly the same. The SNP seem to have flatlined or baselined round about the 30% mark. That's probably going to be where the fight is for who gets the biggest share of the vote in the next Scottish Parliament election, who's going to finish a point or two ahead of the 30% mark, the SNP or Labour. But give or take a poll or two, independence is pretty much 50-50. So what that tells me is that 20% gap between those that want to vote for independence and those that see the SNP as the party they want to support. That now tells me that there's quite clearly a public appetite and probably a demand for more than one pro-independence party in Scottish politics. So that's where ALBA's future lies. Now, many people that were, perhaps, politically not really that overly interested would see ALBA Party as a pro-independence party, and they'd see it as Alex Salmond's party. But beyond that, what did they see about policy? And I think that's where the future lies for the ALBA Party. We have the opportunity to become almost the successor party to the legacy of Alex Salmond's popular government in the way he did politics. And what do I mean by that? So if you start with, for example, the campaigns that Kenny McCaskill's been on, bringing together the social and the economic imperative of why Scotland needs to be independent. Nothing highlights that more so than the absurdity of fuel-poor Scots living in an energy-rich nation. Nothing highlights that more so than Scotland becoming one of the only top 25 oil-producing countries in the world without a capacity to refine its own produce. And within the Scottish Parliament just this week, Ash Regan constructively working with the government to try and get across-the-line policies such as rolling out universal free school meals to all primary school children, such as mitigating the winter fuel cap. And of course, we've consistently been one of the parties arguing that we can't have out-of-control increases to council tax. Next year we're probably going to see some areas try to put council tax up to 10%, 12%. I've even heard of some saying 17%. Now, Alec ran a successful government that then delivered a majority because he protected people's pockets, he promoted sensible policies. You knew that with Alex Salmond, whether you were in business, whether you were a trade unionist in the traditional left of the political spectrum, there was something in the project for you. And our job, I see it, is to actually bring a grown-up politics back to the Scottish Parliament. Serious people with serious policies, and it's only by electing a strong ALBA contingent of MSPs, looking at the polls, which are consistent, that we will retain a pro-independence majority within the Scottish Parliament. And that's absolutely essential if we want to deliver independence. Otherwise, it'll either be a minority SNP government, which is a lame duck for 5 years, or the Unionists will be back. The only way you stop that, and this isn't a party political broadcast, the stats tell you this, the only way you stop that is by putting ALBA MSPs into Parliament to make sure independence is not number 10 in the agenda, not number 9 or 8 or so on. It's the top of the agenda, because it's independence that delivers social and economic justice for Scotland. That's what Alec was all about, and I think that's why we're all in the ALBA Party.
Can I make one point there, Taz? And Chris is absolutely correct to point out the achievements that Alec was able to achieve in a minority government from 2000 to 2011, 2007 to 2011. But what a lot of people forget is at that time, we were experiencing one of the biggest global financial crashes. So anyone who attempts to say that you can't do this or you can't do that because the financial envelope's difficult. The financial envelope could not have been more difficult in that minority government, yet Alex Salmond delivered most of the SNP's successes in that first minority government. So, you know, that is the measure of the man, determination and focus on the people of Scotland.
And in the weeks to come, I think it is right that we spend some time focusing on what can be, because this isn't pie in the sky stuff. It was a government that was run well, that was achieving for the people of Scotland, that was building things, and it can be that way again in a time of despondency when people don't even want to come out and vote. I mean, recent by-elections, let's just touch upon those for a second. Council by-elections have been very interesting. We, of course, have the rise of Reform, a poll out this week that demonstrates from a UK perspective that Reform are behind the Tories and push Labour into third place in a national election. But there is a dynamic there. There are public there who are not coming out to vote, and there are some who are coming out very much with a protest vote. And there's a Reform vote, which is also very, very interesting. But in amongst all of that, ALBA still managed to get ourselves now into a space where we'll actually be electing MSPs, if we keep that going, Chris.
Yeah, so in Inverclyde, for example, I get 9%, and lots of people, Neale, yourself, sent me messages saying, oh, really well done, but you know me, I was really upset because I wanted to win the election. And we didn't actually do much campaigning because it came at a horrible time. Obviously, it was like, you know, I think we were about a week into the election. Alec passed away. He had such massive plans. He wanted to do so many public meetings with the Fannings, about winter fuel. And the Labour and the SNP votes, I've never seen softer votes. Mm-hmm. Both of yourselves actually came and done a bit of door knocking. Every person that you spoke to that was an SNP voter, a Labour voter almost, were saying, no, I think I would vote Chris because, yeah, I agree council tax is too much, etc., etc. But, you know, I don't really think you can win. And again, it's that, you know, going from a PR election to a first past the post back to an STV election, when you actually explain to people, well, actually, you could vote Chris 1, and if he doesn't necessarily do well, then your vote would go to who you want. And they go, oh, well, I'll do that. So to get 9%, with only really spending 2 days actually knocking doors for you know, I mean, understandable reasons for what was going on. I mean, that's a really significant increase, because in the west of Scotland, between 5.5 and 6% historically wins you seats. In Glasgow, again, a campaign that we were quite late into, again, because we had to make a decision, you know, at a really difficult time, 4%. Up in Perth and Kinross, I know, you know, at that point was the largest result we'd ever had. Again, that was enough to get people elected in Mid-Scotland and Fife. And in Dundee, that's, you know, in our stronger vote in the North East probably at the moment would be, you know, in the Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City area where it's really big on oil and gas. But in Dundee, in the North East, we were getting enough support to get people elected. So that's a magnificent baseline to be starting on as we go into the new year, as the election cycle starts. And we've not even started adding, you know, the policies that we will be trying to bring into the Scottish Parliament, as well as delivering Scottish independence. So I'm actually, you know, I know maybe it's not appropriate, I'm actually really positive politically about where Alec has left us, the legacy he's gave to us. We're in a really, really strong position to go on and deliver. He'd have loved to have seen it, Taz. He'd have loved to have seen you elected to the Scottish Parliament. He'd have loved to have seen yourself, Neale, elected, Kenny, Ash, I think maybe myself and others as well. He'd love to see it. But that's our job now, not just to get ourselves into Parliament, because we want to get into Parliament to get the job done, deliver for people in Scotland and deliver independence.
So I think, I think everything that Chris has covered is, absolutely clear. But with regards to reform, all I would say is the only reform that Scotland requires is independence. That's the reform that Scotland needs. That's the answer to all of the structural problems we suffer, both industrial, health, housing, all of these issues and how we grow our economy. They're all dependent on having the full levers of a normal, independent country. So if people want reform, then they need to vote for independent supporting parties and allow us to progress the case for independence.
And of course the reason for formation of ALBA in the first place in 2021, because Alex had accurately predicted that a supermajority would be needed to ensure that we had enough nationalists in Parliament to get an option to vote for independence, however that might be. I mean, obviously favoured the electoral test via an election simply because Westminster kept saying no, as we know. But of course we're not going to get any of that unless we ensure that the next Parliament is full of pro-nationalist politicians. And speaking of nationalist politicians, I think it's worthy of mention, because he's not in the studio today but will be joining us in due course, is to pay tribute to our acting leader, Kenny McCaskill, because not only has he had to take over in such difficult times to lead the party with such strength and ability, but the personal impact on him at the same time, and he stayed strong for all of us. And obviously we look forward to working with him in the future, but certainly worth making note of Kenny's tremendous efforts. And of course Ash, who was in Parliament to deliver a great memorial to Alex when I went to watch that day, and it must be difficult and challenging for her, but of course we're just looking for the opportunity to march many more like her into Parliament. Of course, sadness for all of us is that we wanted Alex to lead us into that chamber, because I remember because he was writing it in the House of Commons Library before delivering it. In his last speech before the Scottish Parliament, he said, bye for now type idea. So he probably felt that he was going to have to return to finish the job. But that job now rests in our hands, the hands of people in our party and across the wider independence movement. I suppose I just wanted to finish today's show by asking you really for a message for the independence movement. This is a blow to us personally, as you've already said, Chris. We've spent a lot of time with Alex over a number of years, for some of us in every aspect of his life. And he's a huge loss to us personally, huge loss to the party, huge loss to the movement and to the country. But we need everybody to keep going, because where we had one person to lead, we're now going to have an awful lot of people to take up that work and take it forward. So Neale, coming to you first, what would your message be to people who are feeling the loss but understand that Alex said that they won't stay in the shadows, their dream will never die, and we have to complete the journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've made this point in speeches in the House of Commons, and it's a really important point. The route to independence is there for us. The ballot box is the only gold standard that we need. We don't need a Section 30 order. We just need popular demonstration of a desire to return as a sovereign state. And we need to stop expecting independence to drop in our laps, because that won't happen. We need to get out there and campaign. We need to vote for parties and candidates who are determined to deliver independence. The wider independence movement needs to put pressure on the political parties to get on with the job, because we all have a responsibility to deliver Alex's dream. He inspired so many of us in 2014, and that has carried us through until now, and I believe that in his memory will carry us through to deliver independence in his name, and not in the too distant future.
Chris?
Scotland won't flourish until we're an independent country, and I think it's pretty clear that the only way we can become independent is by voting for parties that believe in independence. Unionist parties will promise you bread today and roses tomorrow, but we know whether it's Margaret Thatcher, John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and too many Conservative Prime Ministers to mention, but it is all just, you know, false promises, empty hope, and the reality is that whatever's good for London, whatever's good for the southeast of England, will always be the policies that are imposed on people in Scotland. So if you want independence, you need to vote for it. We're obviously going to be putting that really front and centre of the next Scottish Parliament election. We are a unambiguously, unashamed, pro-independence party. You want independence, you vote for us on the list. And I think that's something the independence movement, through past elections, when they've seen that over 1 million votes were wasted, and, you know, we're happy for the unionist parties at Westminster's to play games with our lives, but we somehow think it would be inappropriate for us to actually use the democratic mechanisms available to maximise pro-independence support in Parliament. No, I think that's the job that we need to now get on and deliver.
And just before we close the show, Neale, I'm going to ask you if you have sort of one memory that sticks in your mind about great Alex.
Well, it's actually something that I had forgotten about until after he passed away, and somebody shared a video clip on social media, and it was during I think the local authority elections. We did a photo shoot and an interview in front of the Queensferry crossing with the bridge behind us, and Alec told the story about how somebody had written in to suggest a different name for the bridge, and the name was Kevin Bridges, and I had completely forgotten about that, and it just seemed to encapsulate the joy that a lot of people don't really see that surrounded Alec, and it was such a beautiful moment, and I really treasure having that memory now captured on film, because, you know, that was what being around Alec was like. You know, he always lifted you up rather than struck you down.
Chris?
Oh, you'll not be surprised. I used to quite enjoy the limelight in elected politics, and then what I never realised would actually be so much better was standing backstage behind curtains at conference and having given Alex some ideas over the previous weeks, and then watching, good ideas, but then watching Alex just turn these ideas into sheer magic and gold. It's like almost like turning water into wine. You know, his ability to, you know, understand what you were getting at and then deliver that into real transformative policy, which, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to have done, was just always amazing. And it was just really great hearing people, you know, applaud him as well, because I always thought, you know, he deserved that so much. And then I used to love, as I said, sometimes, you know, yourself as well, you must have experienced that a lot, being backstage and just watching him like go, as opposed to being in the crowd of an event, you know, where you're listening to him, just watching him in his full pomp was, you know, I don't think there was anything better.
Chris McEleny, Neale Hanvey, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks. Both Neale and Chris mentioned in their lovely thoughts about Alex the idea of light, because Alex lit up every room, every heart and every mind as he encouraged us to think big for Scotland and think about what Scotland can achieve and can only achieve as an independent country. For us here at Scotland Speaks, it's been very difficult to carry on, but that is what he would want, because such a big light in our lives has gone out. But for Scotland, we have to ensure that light stays on and we deliver the dream that he knew would never die and would eventually be realised, because that dream needs to be realised for the people of Scotland to reach their full potential and for Scotland to be the best she possibly can. So for that reason, working with yourselves, if you'll continue to watch the show and support it, and with the many people I'd like to bring into the studio to share their stories about Alex, but also the hopes and aspirations for the future, we hope we can continue with the show just as Alex had wanted, certainly up to the 2026 elections. Nothing will ever be the same, nor can it ever, but we can endeavour to do our best for Scotland. And Alex's last words, as you know, he wrote down for me to turn from a file notes into Twitter speak into characters, which was always a challenge for me because he had so many great words and I had to condense them. But his last words were, that he asked me to write down, Scotland is a country, not a county. So for Alex and for Scotland, we must ensure we deliver that reality. Thank you so much for your support.
Hikken smjara, hikken druch, hik gachiane jusinit, hikken bratan har